Imagine surviving 25 years of relentless war, only for Mother Nature to step in and say, "Hold my volcanic ash." Welcome to 1816, where summer took a mysterious vacation. Farmers exchanged wary glances with the sky, and the word unpredictable gained new meaning. This is the story of how one catastrophic year shifted Europe's destiny and ignited tensions that reshaped its political landscape. Buckle up. This tale is as chilling as the summer that never came. The Fragile Peace of 1816, A False Dawn. The year 1816 should have been Europe's sigh of relief. After nearly a quarter century of the Napoleonic Wars, peace finally spread across the continent, offering a moment to rebuild and reflect. In England, this peace was greeted with scenes of farmers resuming their routines and townspeople bustling with cautious optimism. The chill of winter still lingered, but it was springtime, and hope was expected to bloom. Yet, as the weeks wore on, something unsettling became apparent. The warmth of spring never came. By June, it was clear that this was no ordinary year. Instead of sunshine, frost and cold rain gripped the land. The explosive origins. The 1815 eruption of Mount Tambora. The cause of this odd, relentless cold was far beyond the comprehension of the farmers staring out at their stunted crops. The root of the crisis lay in the Pacific, where Mount Tambora erupted in 1815. This colossal volcanic event was the most powerful eruption in recorded history, blasting ash high into the stratosphere and spreading a layer of particulate matter across the globe. This volcanic veil blocked sunlight, leading to a phenomenon known as volcanic winter. The scale of Tambora's eruption was almost unimaginable. It was more than 100 times more powerful than the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens, and it injected immense quantities of sulfur dioxide into the atmosphere. Europe under siege. The cold summer and crop failures. The effects were swift and brutal. Average global temperatures dropped by as much as 3 degrees Celsius, 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit, enough to disrupt weather systems profoundly. Europe became the epicenter of this crisis. In England, where temperatures below 10 degrees Celsius were typically confined to 66 days a year, 1816 saw these temperatures extend to a staggering 146 days. The significance: crops struggled to grow. The critical threshold for growth, around 10 degrees Celsius, was rarely met. Farmers watched helplessly as their fields, usually green and promising in June, remained bare and lifeless. In northern France and the Netherlands, heavy rainfall transformed fields into vast, swampy plains, making planting and harvesting impossible. The onslaught of rain. Europe's drowning fields. The unrelenting rain was perhaps even more devastating than the cold. In France, summer typically brought about 8 rainy days per month. In 1816, that number surged to an unprecedented 20 days per month, flooding fields and ruining what little hope remained for a viable harvest. England experienced a continuous 8-week deluge that left its newly sprouted crops waterlogged and decaying. This wasn't just inconvenient, it was catastrophic. The continent's agricultural backbone was breaking. For many, survival meant venturing out to gather anything remotely edible, whether ripe or rotting, directly from the mud. The term "scraping by" took on a literal, desperate meaning. France's struggle. Economic and political chaos. France, already weakened by the Napoleonic Wars and facing economic devastation, was particularly vulnerable. King Louis XVI had promised to ease the tax burden on the poor, a pledge that became impossible to fulfill as the crisis deepened. The king's credibility waned, and anger simmered among the people who had seen better days under Napoleon's rule, despite the wars. The reinstated constitutional monarchy under Louis XVI was intended to blend royal authority with some democratic structures, but it proved insufficient during this time of dire need. The Constitution allowed elections, but the king wielded significant power, including the ability to override election results and maintain ministers who answered only to him. public sentiment grew increasingly sour, and whispers of rebellion stirred the air. The rise and struggle of Richelieu's government. Amidst this unrest, Louis XEV3 appointed the centrist and diplomatic powerhouse, Richelieu, as prime minister. Richelieu's efforts brought momentary relief as he negotiated the withdrawal of foreign troops and halted reparation payments, restoring France's position among the great powers without the need for conflict. This was a political triumph, but it came with a bitter twist. The French electorate grew more radical, leaning left and forcing the king to replace Richelieu with a Republican sympathetic prime minister. Without the king's full support, this new leadership failed to make significant progress, exposing the vulnerabilities of France's political compromise and setting the stage for future upheaval. Nationalism in Germany, a brewing storm. Meanwhile, a new kind of turbulence was taking root in the German Confederation. Composed of a loose alliance of states formed after the Napoleonic Wars, the Confederation was meant to ensure mutual defense and prevent outside influence. But nationalism was on the rise, challenging this fragile unity. Prussia, seeing an opportunity, proposed reforms that hinted at the idea of a unified German empire. Austria's Chancellor, Metternich, was deeply troubled by this prospect. The Austrian Empire was multi-ethnic, and any move toward a German empire risked igniting tensions with Russia, which held sway over Polish territories included in such a scheme. The idea of an expanded German state also risked sparking conflict that could embroil all of Europe. Metternich's conundrum: controlling the chaos. Metternich, known for his shrewd conservatism and his desire to prevent revolution, sought to tamp down German nationalist fervor with a mix of repression and subtle reform. His solutions included censorship, the formation of a federal secret police, and the suppression of student organizations that were breeding grounds for revolutionary thought. But Metternich's heavy-handedness only pushed dissent underground, creating a simmering tension that would erupt later in the century. While these measures kept immediate revolution at bay, they also revealed the inherent fragility of Austria's power and the limited effectiveness of stifling reform in the face of rising nationalistic ideals. Spain's constitutional crisis, the spark of European anxiety. Spain became another focal point of European unrest. King Ferdinand VII, restored to power post-Napoleon, quickly dismantled the liberal constitution that had granted Spanish citizens significant political rights, including widespread suffrage and active legislative debate. This reversal incensed the Spanish legislature and sparked an alliance between moderate liberals and radical revolutionaries. Even military generals began to support constitutional reform. The king, however, resisted, vetoing laws and replacing ministers with loyalists. When he called on Europe's great powers for intervention to crush the growing rebellion, it risked dragging the continent back into war. The crisis in Spain mirrored broader fears of revolution and tested the alliances formed after Napoleon's defeat. The Monroe Doctrine and Britain's strategic maneuvering. In Britain, the death of Castlereagh led to the rise of George Canning as Foreign Secretary, who surprised many with his pragmatic yet bold policies. Unlike his predecessor, Canning embraced non-intervention and saw Britain's prosperity rooted in trade rather than colonial conquest. When the Spanish crisis peaked, Canning's declaration of British neutrality, while expressing hope for a liberal victory, shocked Europe. It served as a warning to those eager to suppress democratic movements with military might. Canning's most notable diplomatic achievement was his support of the Monroe Doctrine, developed in cooperation with U.S. Secretary of State John Quincy Adams. This doctrine declared that the Americas were no longer open to European colonization, effectively locking in the existing balance of power. Although unenforceable by the U.S. alone, Britain's powerful navy ensured compliance. Canning's support for the doctrine was both a defensive and strategic move. It preserved British influence in South America and deterred European intervention. His diplomacy guaranteed that any attempts by Spain or France to reclaim their colonies would face British opposition, protecting trade routes and solidifying Britain's role as the leading great power. This strategic genius earned canning admiration at home and set the stage for Britain's dominance in the century to come. That's all for today's video. If you enjoyed unraveling these pivotal moments in history, don't forget to hit that like button and share your thoughts in the comments. For more deep dives into the past and their lasting impacts, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next chapter of history.